am live. Very good. Posted in the Discord. Great. Awesome. Welcome back to the live stream. It is January 6th, date of some note in in America particularly. Today marks 4 years to the day that Donald Trump attempted a coup d'etat and got away with it. The coup itself did not necessarily succeed in the moment, but over the long term, their plan was successful to essentially fill the government with cronies and remain completely unaccountable. Huzzah, great, awesome. I'm glad my grandmother didn't live to see that. She probably would have had a heart attack and died on the spot. And it just so happened to be literally January 6th is the 12th day of Christmas. You know, the whole on the first day of Christmas, on the 12th day of Christmas, there's 12 days of Christmas. The last day of Christmas is called Epiphany. The first day of Christmas is December 25th, and the last day is January 6th, which is also a Christian holiday called Epiphany. Not frequently celebrated by Protestants, but sometimes celebrated by Catholics and definitely by Orthodox Christians. And so not last year, 4 years ago, I was thinking like, oh, Epiphany, huh? And then I was like, this shit is happening this is the shittiest Christmas of all time. Christmas 2020 to 2021, shittiest Christmas ever. In the funniest way possible. That's true. It does suck that, like, wasn't that the same year of COVID? COVID started in 2020. With the lockdowns and stuff that started in 2020, but it did, like, I think in 2021, the vaccines weren't available yet, so that was still like during COVID. The COVID pandemic, like, before, like, the pandemic phase, before we completely failed to eradicate the disease and it became endemic, I would say lasted from 2021 to about 2023. I think 2022 or 3 is when the vaccine started becoming a lot more widespread, at least in America and Europe. And the reason I specify that is because to this day, a regime of vaccine apartheid exists, where private companies and healthcare giants are very guarded about the patents to these vaccines. They won't give the third world the rights to produce the vaccines for themselves. They will only sell them batches of doses of the vaccine. They won't actually let them use their own industry and economic capabilities to make the vaccines. So as a result, COVID, instead of going from pandemic to largely eradicated, it went from pandemic to endemic. Now we have to deal with COVID like we deal with the flu, except COVID is a lot more severe and dangerous. Where if the situation was handled correctly, and, you know, patents were waived, the state basically extended its authority to say, look, you are going to give the rights to these countries for free. Otherwise, you are no longer going to exist as a company and shit. Yeah, literally, they let copyright law dictate that a disease continue to ravage the world instead of potentially stopping it. Literally, like, you have the ultimate example of, like, what is a ubiquitously good thing that is achieved, that can be achieved with the power of industry? Oh, I know, curing a disease. You had the interest of curing a disease up against the interest of capital, profit, wealth consolidation, and the interest of capital won out. So as a result, we still have COVID. And there's a lot of other diseases coming back too. Capitalism is Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob. No, I don't think that's true. I think capitalism is worse than Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs, stingy of a businessman as he is, as much as he is a small capitalist, Mr. Krabs despises some of the worst excesses of capitalism. He has a genuine love for his business. He's just a stingy old man who loves running his fast food restaurant. The reason I say this is because of the one particular episode. Sure, he represents capital in the episode where SpongeBob and Squidward unionize and go on strike, but in another episode where new management comes into the Krusty Krab and starts producing gray sludge, the business at the Krusty Krab is doing as good as it ever has been. Customers are flowing in, the profits are rolling. By all rights, that should make Mr. Krabs the happiest crab under the sun. But he hates it because people are being fed like sludge, basically a case on case basis. Kind of not. I think Mr. Krabs is like the petit bourgeois in a capitalist system. He is not representative necessarily of capitalism as a superstructure. When confronted with the superstructure, Mr. Krabs is like, no, I don't want that. That's bad. Because he's like, he actually occupies the position of the opposite of being alienated from the means of production, right? Both the worker and the owners are alienated from the means of production and the things that it produces, right? Uh, uh, they like, it's abstracted to such a level that the workers don't get to enjoy any of the economic benefits, and the owners don't care and like have no attachment to it either way. It's an intensely depersonalized relationship. Mr. Krabs is the opposite of alienated from the well-being of the Krusty Krab. He's actually extremely emotionally invested in the Krusty Krab as a concept, as a fast food restaurant where you make burger, you know? And so as a result, he's really upset, even though profits roll in at an unprecedented rate, when the quality of the experience at the restaurant and the food suffers, you know? Meanwhile, that what's his name? The guy, the new manager they bring in, and they like rename it to Krabby-O Mondays, which is a pretty obvious jab at like TGI Fridays and Ruby Tuesdays and that genre of restaurant and stuff like that. Um, the new manager is much more representative of the ownership class, and their interests and their respective brand of alienation. He doesn't care about the food. It's all a matter of the balance sheets, marketing, money, line going up. The actual relationship that an establishment like the Krusty Krab has to society doesn't matter to him, except for how much money it brings in. Mr. Krabs cares about money because he's the stingy businessman kind of character, but he also cares about the food and the restaurant and SpongeBob, you know? Anyways, what I'm saying is capitalism is infinitely worse than Mr. Krabs. And Mr. Krabs is a stingy fuck. Capitalism is stingy beyond stingy, you know? Uh, uh, like the concept of human life literally does not register with the interests of capital, except insofar as like except insofar as it serves profit. That's a lot of SpongeBob knowledge. Well, you can tell what cartoon I watched growing up. I just got to talk about more shit like that so my brain doesn't fucking atrophy on stream. Jesus. Seriously, streaming has like this insane black hole effect. I hate it. Where it's like all my intelligence just leaves my body whenever I hit start streaming in OBS. I suppose that it could be partly like the knowledge of being watched makes people act in different ways, and like uh, uh, that applies to me on stream. Yeah, you have to think on the spot. It's like you're not just thinking quickly. It's like you're being put on the spot to think quickly. Otherwise, you lose viewers. I don't know why I'm feeling that pressure either, because it's not like anybody watches, right? I'm just kind of here by myself. I have all the room and leeway to think that I want to, but there's just that little psychological piece that I know I'm being watched, and that my role as like a live streamer is to entertain and stuff. I don't know. Maybe, there's a number of paradoxes that I think I need to overcome in order to be a successful live streamer. I think one of them is overcoming that real impetus to better meet the impetus, right? Like if I stop caring about what makes for good viewing in a marketing sense, and I just kind of do what I want and take things at the pace that I feel most comfortable with, then it's like I feel like the stream would actually benefit from that, and like the even the quote unquote marketing aspect of it would be better served if I just completely ignored what makes for good live streaming and what appeals to the algorithm, you know? It's always good to know that essayists spent literal days on the words they say, which makes it sound super robotic. Um, yeah, I suppose it's a different skill set, right? Public speaking, it's like public speaking versus stand up or something like that. What's up, 1v3? Welcome back. I don't know. One of the reasons I mentioned that, like, oh, IQ black hole that is live streaming, is because like there were several things that were very interesting to me in the news cycle that I and that were like politically interesting, that I feel like could provide for good analysis, that I wanted to do on stream, but I can only remember one of them, and that's fucking Venezuela. It's useful for the information they collect. It just sounds super inhuman when you listen to it. Is this the first stream since the capture of Maduro? Doubt it. No, I streamed yesterday. Yesterday was the first stream of the new year. So I'm streaming again today. Funnily enough, more things have actually happened since Maduro was captured. Uh, there's been gunfire in the capital of Caracas. Just a very short blurb from Al Jazeera. Video shows projectiles fired into the air over Caracas, where officials said unauthorized drones were seen over the city days after the U.S. abduction of Venezuela's president. Authorities said police fired warning shots as a deterrent, but gave no details as to who was flying the drones. Jesus Christ, what is wrong with my voice? Was it something I ate? Yeah. Hmm. Who would have thought that? Yeah, Trump took my voice. I guess this is what happens when I try to do my fem voice with no prior warm up. Would have thought destabilizing the government would cause problems. Who would have thought? Indeed, certainly not Marco Rubio. Um, I mean, I think they thought of that. They just didn't care. So yeah, you're gonna have to deal with my voice being really raspy. A lot of it is because I also get easily distracted in the mornings. My sleep schedule has not been great since the new year, partially because I like stayed up late on New Year's Eve and that had a cascading effect. So this morning I just completely forgot to do my voice training exercises. Not that I probably would have fared all that well either way, but nonetheless, it's super frustrating. Yeah, like, wow, they're evil. That's crazy. Maduro showed up in court on a related note. Here, hold on. Maduro not guilty plea. Here we go. But this is also from yesterday, but I think this was after I streamed. Maduro appears in U.S. court. Please let me read something. Don't make me watch a CNN video. Maduro's plea. The ousted Venezuelan leader and his wife pleaded not guilty to drug and weapons charges in a New York courtroom. A defiant Maduro told the judge he had been kidnapped in Caracas. Fantastic. Thank you, CNN. Completely neutral framing. No moral weight given to anything whatsoever. I hate American media so much. It wouldn't surprise me if Maduro was found not guilty of these charges because he's there's no grounds with which to bring those charges. Sure, that shit might be like, I don't know, illegal in Venezuela, but like that's Venezuelan jurisdiction or whatever. Don't you know how moral weight to the left is terrorism? That's so true. You can never jeopardize national security by implying that we shouldn't nuke Venezuela 1 million times or something like that. That case is going to be proceeding. Here's how I think there's two possibilities. If this is a show trial, Maduro's found guilty and then he's like sentenced to prison forever or executed or some shit like that, right? If this is actually a fair trial, there's no world in which Maduro is found guilty of these crimes. It's just such like it's so completely not even remotely connected to US law, the things that he's doing in Venezuela as the president of Venezuela, right? Kind of like how Assad was a war criminal, but imagine going and arresting Assad in Syria, bringing him to America for violating American laws in Syria, right? Like when Assad was still the dictator of Syria, right? No, you bring the fucker up on like international law charges, right? That's how the process would work. But like there's obviously no thought given to that because that's not what this is about. This is about controlling Venezuela, building the technate of America. Shout outs to Kyle Kalinske. That's how I learned about that. Or at least that's where I keep hearing about that. I learned about it initially, I think, somewhere else. And apparently I did learn that like Venezuela has a specific type of oil that America has been relying on a lot more lately. So America actually does want the oil. Increasingly, the type of oil that Venezuela has is called heavy crude, which is different from different kinds of oil that we can get from the Middle East or America. The kind of oil that we have in America and that we get from the Middle East is not heavy crude. Heavy crude is only obtainable from like 3 countries: Canada, Russia, and Venezuela. We already import a lot of crude oil from Canada. As America, there are some refineries in the north, there are some refineries in the south of the US. But because of America doubling down repeatedly on road infrastructure, car infrastructure, and creating more pavement princesses that run on fucking black tar diesel fuel or whatever the fuck, America has been relying more and more on heavy crude oil. So that leads to America importing more from Canada. And it also leads to America, well, having renewed impetus to try to control Venezuela. You know? And of course, if you were rationally pursuing these interests, what you would do is apply some sort of diplomatic pressure, but otherwise maintain relatively normal relations and try to even normalize relations so that Venezuela will do business with America to give us some of the crude oil, right? It's not like that would be particularly difficult for the US to do, but fascists are stupid and they are belligerent and they hate human life and they want you to die. So they're going to do the thing that flexes their muscles the most and makes the most people suffer. You know? And again, it's like part of the um far right project of like the technate of America, where the characteristic of the 12-year-old brain that all the oligarchs and business people collectively share. This was a vision born out of like the 20s and 30s, where there was like fascist movements, of the classical fascist stripe around the world in the 20th century. In America, there was this idea coming from that movement with the oligarchs of America simply expanding, like returning to the Monroe Doctrine and annexing Canada, annexing Greenland, annexing much of Central America and some of South America, and basically whatever land America doesn't directly control, have it controlled by puppet states in South America, so that both of the American continents are controlled by the US. And basically, they just want to paint the map with the US flag real big. And that's the extent to which they thought about it, because more land equals more powerful America, right? And to them, that's how politics works. Like I said, 12-year-old brain, where there's like, I mean, yeah, land is a valuable resource, but like this is the fucking 21st century. And even in the 20th century, shit did not work like that. Um, it's their image of how to like do American revanchism and like get back at the world for humiliating us. What is the supposed humiliation? They would have a million different explanations because they all made it up in their head, and it's unique to each of their separate individualized cuckold fantasies. How America has supposedly been humiliated. But nonetheless, they agree on what we should do about it, which is nuke the third world and build the tech native America or something. Sometimes I think we should remove Rome from history. I don't. In fact, I feel like Rome should be featured more prominently. Half the people that like the problem with the Rome bros is that they don't know jack shit about the Roman Empire. Right? Like every time people reference like, oh, Rome fell because of foreigners, Rome fell because haha crossing the Rubicon, that's because people don't know enough about the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire declined the same way as every other empire in history declined, as a result of internal contradictions that sharpened over time without being addressed, and a result of reactionary ideology coming to the fore, doubling down on those contradictions, and imperial overextension in a desperate attempt to remain the power that it once was, when it's clearly evident that circumstances are changing and these problems need to be reviewed. And it had a cascading effect. Literally got split in two. Okay, people don't want to talk about this. Rome being split in two prolonged the empire for generations. If Rome remained a single administrative empire, if Rome was not split into East and West, Rome was the physical size of the United States like thousands of years ago. That shit barely held itself together at the best of times. Splitting the Roman Empire in two made it an order of magnitude easier to administrate, which prolonged its life for a considerable amount of time. And people think a world government would function. A world government would function. We have proof of that because there is already, to an extent, a world government. It simply only exists for the owning class. Capital is international. I talked about this during the tier list video, right? Internationalism is a fundamentally good idea. We today have the means to do a world government of sorts, right? The political circumstances and will is not there presently, except for the cases in which this has already been realized because business interests are truly international. They know no such thing as borders. Borders are measures meant to constrict us, the regular people. I'm saying just one giant, and that's what I'm responding to. That's what I'm talking about. One unified world state, one unified world government. That exists for the ruling class. It does not exist for the working class. We know that it's possible. They have specifically tried to prevent that from being realized for all of the underclasses of the world. That is possible, and it would function. That's what billionaires are afraid of, because they know it would work. They have to devote so much fucking effort to stop that from happening. God damn it. My voice is not cooperating with me still. In terms of the technical abilities of governing, a world government is more possible now than the Roman Empire was in its day. It's just a matter of the political circumstances being vastly, vastly different. You know, capital taking a very different character. How we define a government and nations taking a very different character. And that, like, essentially, time to bring out the sign language. True, if it were not for the fact that sign language is actually different across languages. That's why in America we specify ASL, American Sign Language, because American Sign Language is still English. If you can read ASL, they are using hand signs to mimic letters to spell things in English with English grammar structure, more or less. So that probably doesn't even work, you know? French Sign Language, likewise, uses hand signals to communicate letters to spell and say things with French grammar structure, you know? Yeah, I'll just have my dad translate it. W dad right there. Many such cases. Anyways, I got distracted. What were we on about? Oh yeah, Tech Native America. I do wonder how many languages there are. Thousands. There are thousands of languages. Lost the plot like half an hour ago. That's okay. I didn't lose the plot. Eminem of Sign Language translates for every version of sign language. We talk about before we talk about the concept of what one is. We were talking about Venezuela. I mentioned that this is part of an overarching project from the owning class in America, and by that I mean like the oligarchs. They want to build like the tech native America. Again, it's just part of the same project of consolidating power, and it is still about the Monroe Doctrine. It's also about the oil and the tech native America. Those are all like compounding and connecting interests. And they will ruin an already almost failed state to do it. As to the gunfire, this was actually like initially kind of surprising to me. If I go back here, there is video of this. Let me see. Oh, you hear it much more prominently from this person. Yep, that doesn't sound like fireworks. I guess on some level it does, but like we saw the magnesium trails or whatever of the arms fire in the sky. For my headset, it sounds like rain. That's some heavy ass rain. What kind of rain are you getting up there? I don't know. This initially this surprised me. I was like, okay, because what I thought was that the generals and the sort of existing power structure in Venezuela ultimately gave up Maduro, and that was more or less that. That's why like America was able to roll in, just grab Maduro, and then like get out of there. But it's also possible that not all of the generals or not all of like the power players in Venezuela, the ministers, the generals, the vice president, whoever, it's possible that not all of them were in on the plan or were like co-signing it to happen, right? Like they might not have all been down to just let America kidnap Nicolas Maduro. And this could be the result of that. I think this is getting into civil war, like potential civil war territory where there's various warring factions in the government. Uh, that's the most likely scenario to my mind. In fact, I saw a poll a little while back when before Maduro even appeared at trial, which was like, what do you think is going to happen to Venezuela now that America is like doing this raid, right? And the options were, I don't remember what all the options were, but one of them was dictatorship, U.S. backed, and one of them was civil war. And at the time, I was like, it's a shame I can't respond to this with multiple answers because I actually think both of those things are going to happen in that order, right? Famously, nothing bad has ever happened from America trying to unilaterally topple a government and prop up a replacement that's very unpopular both inside the governing structures and outside of it. It only makes sense, right? The support is not unanimous even within the structures of government for what's her name? The vice president, the former vice president, now sworn in president of Venezuela, backed by the U.S., formerly Maduro's vice president. And Venezuela was already almost a failed state. The one thing that probably kept them from being that was the fact that they had nationalized the oil industry, so they had an economic base of sorts. Like, this represents a significant step down from the situation before, and the situation before was already very close to profound instability, if not already there. So I think we get the U.S. dictatorship, the U.S. backed dictatorship, which enjoys significantly less legitimacy, both at home and abroad, even than Maduro's government. And that, I think, is a recipe for a civil war to start brewing. And I do mean like the modern kind of civil war where nobody fucking knows what's happening. There's not like two formal belligerents. Sure, there are large dominating factions, but there's a million smaller like insurgent groups and whatever. Venezuela is going to fall apart, and it's going to be America's fault. You know? America's going to try to do nation building, but at like for the sake of taking all the oil from Venezuela, but like we're not going to America's not going to be in control of enough of the nation to do nation building across the country, right? I do actually think that this is going to be to hazard a guess, to get a little specific, which is very liable to be wrong, but I think the general picture is going to be similar to what happens. I will get to that 1v3. You guys remember the kind of relationship Russia had with Syria, where effectively there was like about 50%, maybe a third of the country, in terms of like the urban centers or whatever, that was controlled by Assad's government and backed by Russia. And the rest of the country, there was like the significant part that was controlled by the rebel faction, which has now since taken over Syria. And then there were like a bunch of different insurgency groups and they were dealing with ISIS and whatever. It was a whole hot mess. And you had the pocket of the dictatorship backed by Russia. I think that's what we're going to see in Venezuela, where there's a pocket of Venezuela, a significant chunk of it, but not all of it, that's controlled by the U.S.-backed dictatorship. Then there's going to be like some other large factions controlling most of the rest of the country, which will include a lot of other urban centers too. And then there's going to be a bunch of small like rebel groups, and it's just going to be an entire shit show, and it's going to be a failed state for like a decade or more. It's going to be really ugly, and it's going to last a long time. And but the neocons are going to have a conflict with which they can justify infinite military spending, because the perennial instability means that there are armed factions constantly fighting each other for control over a region and legitimacy, for the legitimacy of state power. You know. That is true. I do think if you're not even willing to hazard a guess, I think it speaks to a lack of imagination and a profound cowardice. But that's not to say you have to guess all the time. This is an educated guess that I am willing to make because it's also consistent with, you know, fascists wanting to do the tech native America, but being extremely stupid and incompetent, right? That's why I put the word occasionally. Yeah, of course. But to come back to the international community, no way the world can just let Trump do that. I have bad news, 1v3. The world actually did just completely let Trump do that. Every single state, except for, I think, Spain, Norway, and Ireland, uh, just completely refrained from criticizing the Trump administration at all. Many of them offering pretty lukewarm support for the United States, just going in unilaterally toppling Venezuela and completely ignoring international law. Like I said last time, this is the Trump administration, you know, in America, dipping its toe into the water. And if nobody says anything about that, then they know that they can just belly flop into the pool and nobody's going to say anything. And the only countries that said anything about this are Spain, Ireland, and Norway, which is not even enough for a broader international consensus to even start forming, let alone any meaningful action to come against the United States as a result of this. You know, as we know, even when the international community is pretty united on an issue, as frequently happens on humanitarian matters when conveniently the transgressor of human rights is a third world nation with no significant allies, the most they can do is like send peacekeepers and do nothing meaningful to improve the situation. It's just virtue signaling again. But in this case, very few countries were even willing to virtue signal that what the US did was bad, illegal, and like stupid and destabilizing. Like Britain supported the US, Canada supported the US, France supported the US. Like their governments all issued statements that were like positive on the US removing Maduro from Venezuela unilaterally, contrary to our own law, contrary to international law, much of which we are not signatories on. Thank you. But yeah, unfortunately, the world did just let them get away with it. And that's part of what makes me think this is going to get a whole lot worse because there's no consequence to America engaging in this sort of behavior as of yet. We're going to feel the consequences internally. Because this is a project that revolves around the consolidation of wealth and power by the owning class, it means enshittification will ensue. Things will infinitely get worse just for decades in the United States. Conditions will worsen. But no reckoning is going to come from the international community until they have to have an internal reckoning of their own with worsening conditions at home in their countries. Wild how it's just talked about and then left alone. Yeah, they should do something. They're not going to. Because remember what I said, capital is international. Capital does not know any borders. The same interests that are currently running the United States are friendly to or are the same interests running all the European countries too, you know, big companies. Sure, the EU is like a more active regulatory body, but they are still tepid at the best of times. And ultimately, you know, they're fine with this. This is what they wanted too, right? Like I said, capital is international. And yes, other countries are going to start behaving like this. China now has ample reason to just kind of invade Taiwan and reabsorb it. In fact, China would have better legal arguments to do that with Taiwan than the United States did with Venezuela or would for Cuba, right? Like this is negative consequences all around. And like I said, no country is going to check the United States on this because the US is too powerful, still represents too big of an economic unit, and is still too economically interconnected despite all the tariffs. Yeah, it's just the only way that this sort of behavior is going to change is when the internal contradictions in America sharpen so greatly that reckoning starts to come from within. You know, political reckoning. And the only way that reckoning would come from other countries is if those other countries have those internal reckonings with worsening economic conditions first, which, as Europeans are eager to point out, would not happen in Europe before America, because America's economic situation is much, much worse than that of most European countries. America is more economically unstable and more addled by debt person per person than the average European country. Even the not as wealthy ones, are more economically stable than America in the sense that they have a real economic base. Only thing I know of is that we stopped working together with the US and the Caribbean due to them taking out those ships. Relatively inconsequential, I would say. A lot of those moves are going to be optics at the best of times. It's going to be like, oh, this is bad optics to do this. But like, not doing joint exercises with America and the Caribbean is going to not matter very much. There's no like, it's a performative thing. I'm going to take my ball and go home. Meanwhile, the United States standing in front of the ball factory, which produces infinite balls. I couldn't keep a straight face. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's one of the major flaws with liberal internationalism, which becomes a feature of fascist internationalism, which is that if one state starts acting belligerently, if America turns into a rogue state, much like how Europe was not willing to check Israel meaningfully, despite the fact that like the entire global public hates Israel for the genocide and atrocities it's committing in Palestine, no states have really taken action against them. Not big ones anyway. So they're obviously like, Israel only represents a proxy of American interests. America is the actual thing. They're going to be even less willing to do anything regarding America's actions than Israel. America just represents that much more of a, you get it. I think I've made the argument enough times at this point. Hit him with the conditions will worsen. Where's that? There we go. This is my analysis of the situation. End the segment. There's another meme that's been bouncing around in my head lately, which is the "it insists upon itself" meme. So it was one of those things where I had seen it enough to like wonder what it actually meant and look it up. And it meant exactly what I thought it meant, which is like, it's sophistry, right? It doesn't actually mean anything, but it's like, sounds funny. And it's like basically the sophist intellectual jack off equivalent of just saying, I don't care. Like the one of the broader memes, like the context in which that phrase appears is like, oh, such and such movie receives glowing reviews and whatever. The consensus is it's a good movie and people really like it. But then there's like somebody like who's a critic doesn't like it, and it's like obvious that it's a good movie, and the review is just like, it insists upon itself or something like that. I don't know why I find that so funny, but it's just like, it's like a very intellectual fuck you. I don't like it because I don't like it. You know? Legitimately, okay, I remember talking a little bit about how like Brian F had a very contrarian take about Dune part 2, I think, or which one was it? It was Dune Part 1 or Dune Part 2, but he provided some analysis that made me understand his thought process, where it's like, okay, the movie just wasn't for him. Every movie isn't for everybody. And, Brian F notable FGC streamer explained why like that wasn't for him. I do think it'd be funny if that situation comes up again for the streamer thing to do to just be like, you say it insists upon itself. Like, oh, I didn't like this movie that like everybody else liked and it was a pretty good movie or whatever. It's like, and then chat gets on your case for why you don't like it. And you just say it insists upon itself and then move on. At the end of 2025, one of my favorite Dutch comedians talked about how many people, especially here, think of something as, oh, how awful, isn't it? But then do nothing else about it. Talking, yes. Doing something, just something to any problem. Nah. Yeah, there's a very similar problem in the United States, which is why you see so little activism in America. This is partly due to car infrastructure making it very difficult to just roll out of bed and go to a protest. If you guys remember, like in Greece, there were those anti-corruption protests in the wake of this, like not only train crash, but cover up. And that was because a lot of people would see there's like a crowd growing in an actual town center. And they'd just be like, oh, that'd be cool. Let me go see what's going on. And they just kind of casually walk up. And now there's more people as part of this protest. It requires a sort of dense enough community that you can just sort of see something unfolding and go and walk up to it, ask what's going on, and potentially be a part of it. America straight up does not have that, you know? With the way suburbs are designed, like if you're living near DC, right? Or even in DC, you can't just wake up and like go to the edge of the block and see that there's something happening in the town square. There's no town square. You have to like go to organizer websites and whatever. You have to look for a thing you already know is happening, specifically seek it out, and then make a conscious effort to get in your car and drive 30 minutes to get to a local protest. That's one of the reasons that activism doesn't happen. It's also owes in part to the fact that the United States is part of the first world. It is an economic hegemon. And so people are like, even with all the debt and stuff, people are too materially comfortable to want to like have the perception of risking something to go out and do activism, to put something on the line for that, you know? And to an extent, this is also a thing in European countries. You see more activism in Europe because of the fact that there are stronger civil society organizations, there are stronger community structures. Cities are just planned better, you know? But like, it's still in Europe. Europe being composed largely of wealthy countries also suffers from that problem somewhat, that like a lot of people aren't going to be as willing to put stuff on the line. That's why you see a lot of big protests and things like that happen in poorer countries. You see a lot of these more drastic social movements happening in South America. In a lot of the like global South is where these movements were happening. This is part of why how like Maoist third worldists make their argument that like socialist revolution is more likely to happen first in the poorer countries, in your sub-Saharan Africa, in your South America, Southeast Asia, that sort of thing, because they have less to lose to begin with, you know? For the first No Kings protest, I had to know the location, took a couple buses to get there. Yeah, the No Kings protest suffered from this uniquely. In fact, No Kings protest, for how big of a display of public sentiment it was, I think is exemplary of everything wrong with the political landscape of America and the political zeitgeist of American protests. You know, it's always against something, never for something. And you have to know where it is beforehand. It's scheduled for a certain day. That's the thing too. Protests in America, they schedule them for like one day. It's not like a strike. In the Americans' brains, strikes and protests are different things. You learn about them as different things, right? And so it's like, oh, there's a protest happening on this day and only for this day. Come to such and such location, and you have to get on several buses to get there, or you have to drive 20 minutes or longer, depending on like for somebody that lives in a rural area, you'd have to drive into a city, which could take an hour just to get to a local protest, you know? You have to care so much more about politics in America to actually be able and willing to do something, like to be politically active, which is a big problem and contributes to how horrible of a situation America is in right now. In a weird way, social alienation has positive and negatives unintentionally. Yeah, it's like, I don't know if I would necessarily consider it alienation specifically, but like there's a silver lining to material conditions being very dire. Um, that like, in fact, I would say it's not necessarily alienation so much as like just directly dire material conditions. Um, but nonetheless, I think I see the argument that like there's a silver lining to material conditions being very dire in a certain country. That means people are like, well, shit, I don't have much to my name anyway. Might as well, right? It also potentially plays a role in like why the European police behave the way they do as opposed to the American police. The American police, I don't think are necessarily like so uniquely. I think they are uniquely violent relative to other police forces in like Europe and stuff, but it's similar orders of magnitude still. Uh, but in Europe, you'll actually see people like scrapping with the police if there's a big enough protest, right? Like the police don't always have this uncontested uh, uh, presence to just sort of quell any sort of politically inconvenient sentiment the way they do in America. Again, owing to a number of factors. My pink sheep blew up? No! Rip. You can just die another one, unless it was naturally spawning, in which case, I'm sorry. Uh, uh, F in the chat or something. I mean, I assume he's talking about Minecraft. That was my only sheep? Oh no, I'm sorry. That sucks. Are you telling me you don't get attached to digital pets? I do, which is why I don't frequently get digital pets. Because the loss just hurts. And I'd rather form attachments to real people and animals. You know? It's parasocial, and I try to avoid it, is what I'm saying. That doesn't mean I never do it, though. In my Minecraft world, uh, famously, real people and animals don't die. You know that's not what I meant. Stop pretending. You know exactly what I meant. That's not to say I never do that, though. Like in my Minecraft world, I happen to I know that like if you use a name tag on something, it won't despawn. Uh, so what I did was I was building like uh underwater houses, like to resemble kind of like Subnautica bases, and an Enderman wandered into one of them. Like it teleported. I think it was raining outside, and so the Enderman teleported to the closest patch of dry land that it could find, which was in this underwater house that I had built. And so I just named the Enderman and labeled the house as their house, and they just live there now. They just hang out there. How sentient are Endermen? They're not. Now my guy has to play Subnautica. 1v3, but that's where you're wrong. Because those houses were actually inspired by Subnautica, which I have played. In fact, I remember watching Markiplier's playthrough of Subnautica way back in the day, back when I was in high school, which prompted me to want to buy the game. And so I did. I downloaded it on Steam, and I actually played a bit of Subnautica 1 at the very least. And after a while, I think I uninstalled it since because it was just so big. Like the game file was so big, and I wanted to have some space on my hard drive, and I couldn't justify it for how infrequently I had played it since I had been watching Markiplier basically. But it is still like I think the concept of the game is very cool that you have this. It's like an underwater adventure game. I mean, game lore. Oh, Endermen are sentient creatures. I mean, they're like relatively intelligent, right? I actually, for a while, like throughout 2025, I think I had watched a bunch of like Minecraft lore videos, where it was like theorizing about the role of the illagers, the villagers, the Endermen, and whatever, how the ancient cities were built and whatever, and that like basically there were these three intelligent kinds of beings, and it was the Endermen, the villagers, and the illagers. Um, and they like all had their own societies and stuff, which was cool. Minecraft story mode of all things. I hate Minecraft story mode. It insists upon itself. Now a sheep drowned. Bro, what is happening to all your sheep? Me busting out the opportunity to use the it insists upon itself. MC story mode was hilariously bad. Yeah. Kind of funny in Minecraft where you just show up in the end, kill the Ender Dragon, and then just dip. That is kind of funny. But like apparently in the Minecraft lore, the Endermen are like glad that you did that because it's like, bro, this dragon is fucking harassing us and it stranded us on this godforsaken island or whatever. Anyways, recently, kind of convenient, or it would make you look like the bad guy. I mean, you're the bad guy in plenty of ways in Minecraft. I mean, you're literally engaging in resource plundering, uh, uh, in a land where creatures, intelligent or otherwise, already live, and they're justifiably very angry at you for it. Right? Like you go to the Nether, you plunder the fucking bastions, and the piglins are like, "What the fuck, man?" Rightfully so. You're coming in and stealing all their shit. You go into the village, and they're actually like cool with it, which is the strangest part. You go down in the caves, you're plundering the earth for resources, which like obviously the mobs are not too happy with you for that. Although for that, I would say that makes a little bit less sense because it's like, how are they going to even use all that anyways? I don't know. Um, yeah, very climate change coded, but at the same time, I think one of the best things to come out of modern Minecraft is precisely how different of an identity it has from old Minecraft because it makes me like both of them. There are actually reasons to play the much simpler, much more difficult, older versions of Minecraft, like from the alpha and beta days. And there are plenty of reasons also to play the new releases from like 1 point. When did they introduce the way better swimming? I would say that's like where the extremely cool shit started. Like from 1.17, I think that's when they did it onwards. Like when you can swim really fast now, and especially when they like introduce the new cave system or whatever. Yeah, 1.13. Ancient builders ruined the world. Now you use up the world that remains. There's an update one time where they re-emptied the entire nether. I think I remembered that. It was very weird. Um, but yeah, I think new Minecraft has a lot of perks and reasons to play it. Uh, okay, so then 1.18 and 19 would be for like where the really, really good shit for modern Minecraft, I think, all starts coming together. You know, there's reasons to play both. And they're both really good. You know, I would actually get kind of lost in the sauce of old Minecraft sometimes when I was playing it. To such an extent, I actually did like kind of the pinnacle of all the shit that there is for you to do, and that like the hardest thing that there is to do, which is like get enough diamonds to craft a full set of armor. But like so much of that game is you just exercising your imagination. It like the fact that you are in a much more limited sandbox, I feel like gives you more room to exercise that. And then now Minecraft has so heavily emphasized the adventure elements. Uh, you know, it's just so good. And I feel like there were certain release versions that represented a very awkward phase of Minecraft where it was very strange to play. You know, it didn't have the comprehensive adventure identity, I think, of the new versions. It still had some of the like they were trying to add new stuff, but it still kind of felt like the much older versions. Up to about, I don't know, 1.6, I believe. 1.6 is when they introduced um horses, you know? And then I think 1.7 is when it started to come out of that a little bit. 1.7 they introduced the new biomes, the roofed forest and the savanna. Yeah, Peter, the horse is here. Minecraft is so is good. It's really good. 13 was swimming, 14 was bees, 15, I don't know. 16 was the nether, 17, I don't know. 18 was caves, 19 was ancient city, 20 was random shit, 21 was trail chambers. Yeah. No, I remember 17 actually introduced the new cave system and new depth. 1.18 changed the lighting system to make exploration of the new cave systems viable. 1.17 was probably the most awkward mid version where you had the big caves and stuff, and you had the ground extending below layer 0. But the lighting hadn't changed, so mobs still spawned at light level 7 and below as opposed to only at light level 0. So it would be almost impossible to actually go in and explore one of those bigger caves. It would just be so unreasonably resource intensive to have enough torches to light it all up. So in 1.18, they changed it so that now, as long as there is light of level 1 or greater, mobs will not spawn. And that made it a lot easier to explore those caves. In fact, it made it viable, even at all, to explore those caves. I love the underground biomes too. The underground biomes are so good. Especially, I think, even though it can be kind of difficult to navigate and mine stuff in, the lush caves is probably my favorite underground biome. Ranking recent updates, I'd say 1.18, 16, and then 19 or 21. I think 1.19 represents my favorite recent update because it added ancient cities in the deep dark. Or 21. 1.21 was a pretty good update too. Lush caves. I use those plants so much with building. I wish I could find a lush caves biome to like in my creative world to build stuff. Actually, I think I have found one. Here I'm getting lost in the sauce again. I was gonna talk about, like, politics or something. Uh, you know how fixations get people distracted? That is true. That is true. Those are underneath azalea trees. Really? Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you for, mentioning that. I actually know where to look now. That's awesome. Um, do I really wanna keep talking about politics? I think I do. I'll talk about one more thing, and then I might call the stream there. I have a couple things to do. Uh, not gonna look at that. Um, so I'm sure that people heard about it if you're tuned into American politics. There was a right-wing grifter that went around Minnesota harassing daycare employees to let them see the kids. It is exactly as creepy as it sounds. Distractions did not get Y2K to play MC. Worth a try. You know what? Maybe I will. Maybe I will after I talk about this very briefly. I don't care enough to make that a to make this Minnesota thing a segment because of how stupid it is. But yeah, this right wing grifter was just like going around harassing random daycare employees. They had baked up the conclusion, characteristic of like the peak of right wing journalism. They had baked up the narrative already that, oh, yeah, Somali migrants are committing massive fraud in Minnesota, with the daycares being the front. So, what this guy ended up doing was to supposedly prove this crackpot conspiracy theory, went around to a bunch of daycares, demanded to see the kids, then like turned to the camera and said, see, this is suspicious. When they said, no, we're not going to let you see the kids. Like perfectly encapsulating of the right wing, that it's that like demands to see somebody else's children. Is this a skit? No, it is not a skit. Did this happened? In fact, the bullying from the right actually got severe enough that unfortunately Tim Walz stepped down from the re-election race to run for governor again. He's no longer running for governor again because of this. I don't know why, you know. But no, yeah, it's a new favorite talking point of the right. It's the new they're eating the dogs. You remember they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats about Haitians and stuff during the election cycle. um that and how quickly it went from like random bullshit on Twitter to now like it fast tracked through the pipeline to now standard Republican talking points. The same thing is happening here. Now it's like, oh, Somalis equals fraud. That's the talking point. Uh, you know, all because this guy decided to cook up some ethnic hatred of Somalis beforehand, went to a bunch of daycares, demanded to see the kids, and then acted like that proved his point when they were like, no, we're not going to let a random fucking individual see somebody else's kids in a daycare. Like, you know, no, you can't do that. Uh, this country is so fucking stupid and cooked. This is the media landscape, by the way, going forward. Like with CBS being overtaken by stooges from the Trump administration or who are aligned with the Trump administration, and a similar takeover happening to various other news outlets, and Fox News just airing shit directly from Twitter with no previous vetting. This is what news media in America is now. You know, come to us as long as you still can. I can't. I'm not gonna. Sometimes I'm tempted, but I think it's just lib shit to be like, oh yeah, I'm moving outside of the United States. Like, for one, no, you're not. For two, you can't just fucking run away when times get tough. Come on. That's part of the problem. People don't want to fucking get their hands dirty and do anything. You know, I'm over here. I'm like, legitimately, I just put in an application to do like local volunteering where I live. You know, random MC cave sound. I don't know why they made that shit so scary. But yes, Minecraft cave sounds do be making me shit myself. You play Minecraft because it makes me feel alone. It's just it's like it's cozy. In the depressing way, not the scary way. Hmm. I'm sorry to hear that, I guess. That's not a good thing to feel. What even is 1.21.11? What is this? I actually dislike how they're making even the in like the mid version updates so significant. Nautilus and Zombie Nautilus. Like I kind of don't like how it's like, oh yeah, here's this middle update between 1.21 1.22 and we're adding a whole bunch of shit. I don't know. I do one thing I do have a critique of with modern Minecraft, which speaking of, I am going to play right now, is that I feel like they're adding a lot of features, so much so that it's like hard to keep track of everything anymore. Yeah, the honestly, what I would compare this to is like the old school days of Minecraft, where even the like beta 1.4 or 1.401 or whatever, or like Minecraft Alpha 1.2.1 versus 1.2.6, there was like significant additions across those versions. I feel like they're trying to return to that convention, but at the same time, it you know, it insists upon itself. No, I don't know. Like I don't know. I think it's like too much almost. Especially because I play Minecraft modded. It's just I can't imagine it's easy for people to keep up with all the stuff that's happening. Also, I use a custom resource pack with in my game. The amount of new things I remember wishing for to be in the game when I was young. One of the great things I was at was shields. The fact that they added shields was actually awesome. Game froze because Minecraft takes up so many resources, or the stream froze. I've been building more stuff. You could probably tell. That was so long ago. Yeah, but that reminded me of that because it was like a thing that people would ask for a lot to get added to the game, and then it finally got added. I've been working on this. Been building a bunch of shit. Been building a lot more apartments. I really like this one. Also, this is how lighting used to look in classic Minecraft. Torches used to give the same kind of light as the sun. There wasn't an orange tint. I actually managed to get this like custom light map working with this resource pack. You know what's crazy? I actually remember what like video I was watching or what else I was doing when I was building these. don't know how far a boat won't cancel your fall damage anymore. I don't know. I've never been like such a knowledge guru that I would know that sort of stuff. I remember I was watching a playthrough and like video about No, I'm Not Human when I was building this apartment here. When I was building these apartments, all of these actually, I was watching a video about the comprehensive history of the Street Fighter series, this one too, and how much of a mess Street Fighter history was. This one I remember, this one I was building recently enough that I was watching news about Venezuela and the Epstein files. So that was the duration of building this. This one I built while watching news about like the TPUSA conference where Ben Shapiro took a bunch of shots at like other conservatives within the movement. You gotta love that MAGA infighting. It's really something. Why did I hear some warden sound? Possibly because you're right above a deep dark. That happened to me one time in a survival world of mine. Yo, what's up, Sparkly Image Car Wash? Yeah, I haven't changed the category. I don't think I intend to because this is more gonna be just me chilling with chat than actually like playing the game, I think. Remember how I was working on rebuilding my hometown? With every building, I think, oh yeah, I was doing this and this in the meantime. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how like you remember doing the thing and then you kind of automatically remember what was happening as you were doing it, right? This house I've actually built in survival mode. This is a cool house. A lot of these houses, one of the challenges I really like doing is that sometimes when I'm watching a Minecraft video, I just like pause on a frame is like, oh, that house looks interesting, and just analyze the frames before and after to see if I can get a sense of what the house looks like and just build it, you know, from what I can see of it. Does make you think, damn, I watch a lot of YouTube. I do too. Don't worry, you are not alone in that respect. So it activates more of the neurons connected to it. Yeah. See, this is not the area where I did the giant cave exploration. Again, there's the seawall. You guys know the story of the seawall already. I've told that enough times. I don't need to revisit it. What are you gonna do without the internet or YouTube? Walk around and stare at trees? True. You could read a book. I bought all my college stuff used because that meant I could like go back to it if I found something particularly interesting. And lo and behold, that's what I'm doing right now, outside of stream. I believe I have showed this off. This is based off of a real Soviet era apartment building in Vladivostok. That is why I called it Vladivostok Apartments. This one neighborhood here, every neighborhood I try to give like a real sounding name, but that's not a real place in the real world, except for this one, which I just named Vladivostok. And this is the only neighborhood that applies to. Comprehend anything due to the inability of combining sounds for some reason. I don't know why. I actually have a hard time with sound related things too sometimes. Voice training has been kind of challenging for me, especially because like so much of voice training is them saying like, okay, you want to use this muscle and this muscle. It's like, fucking, how do I do that? Like, how do I know that I'm even doing this correctly? It's like, um, I frankly have an easier time kind of mimicking certain sounds. And in fact, they kind of, a lot of trans voice trainers will recommend that you maybe find a sound that you want to mimic or find other sounds that you can try and mimic and see which one feels the best. Uh, but none of them do those kinds of sounds. Like they don't say, for example, listen to this person talking or this person talking, right? Yeah, it's like sound impressions. You guys have heard my Bernie Sanders impression. That's how it like I've heard Bernie Sanders talk. So I that's how I know how to do Bernie Sanders' voice. I've also had practice. But like a for feminizing my voice, I don't have a lot of reference to go off of. I just kind of have to do the exercises and assume that it's working. I think this is the area where I did. By the way, just casual flex. Every single one of these buildings was built by me, block by block. In fact, I think all of this development happened in the past year and a half or 2 years. Like everything that lies along the railroad there, for the most part. Somewhere in here, there is. Yes. Okay, here it is. Call that a flex? Yeah. I'm flexing that I really like this world and I'm interested in building in Minecraft creative mode and have built a lot actually. Submerged mining station. Follow the lights. This was something that I spent a very, very long time doing. Where I went through, flew around a bunch and explored this cave and basically took care to make sure that you could navigate this in survival mode if you wanted to or needed to. This is meant to be the like initial congregation area, and then there's stuff over here. You take this waterfall, and then absolutely massive cave opening here. It goes on too. Like I lit up so much cave. If I go into spectator mode, I'm gonna phase through the wall here. Look how much this cave system encompasses. It just keeps going. I actually remember even in creative mode, I got lost in here on several occasions trying to explore this whole place. There's even a part that goes over here. 1.18 flexing. This was in 1.20, I think, that I did this. My favorite cave biome right here, the lush caves. And this was just, this, by the way, was just me sticking to the caves that I would consider like big boy caves, where it's like the big giant open area or the massive cavernous hallways. You know, I didn't go in the, you'll notice I didn't go in any of the like much smaller passages, you know? Like I didn't go in any of the ones that looked like that, those little spindly ones. That's supposed to be like the non-residential development. Like I try to, for every 10 residential buildings, I try to have one non-residential. So like industrial or commercial building. So it could be like a little restaurant, or it could be this mining operation down here. It could be like this over here is a library, I think, that I built. Oh no, this is the like mining facility. I think it has a library in it. Yeah. This cliffside was a really nice way to test some like ideas for this sort of stuff. A lot of this was taken from like YouTube tutorials and whatever, but it's just really fun to cover a big old cliffside that would ordinarily not be that hospitable to construction with like these little houses, so you can like make it livable all of a sudden. These kinds of designs are really cute, though, where you're like living on a little sailboat. Then, you know, the tiny houses. This is a duplex, but it's a duplex this way. So like this is one and that's one, instead of them being like, I love building houses above anything else though. That's just kind of what I started doing when I was a teenager, and it kind of stuck. Initially, it's informed by like my image of a city is that it's just houses, right? I used to live in a suburb, remember? Like it was only a few years ago that I learned just how dysfunctional American urban landscapes were. And I had it's mostly because housing is the thing I have the most practice building. And I feel like in Minecraft, there's plenty of things to do in the world. And I also recently didn't just build houses. I started emphasizing like other kinds of buildings to make it feel like an actual city, you know, farms, like a little logistics office, a mining operation, and whatnot. Like, there's plenty of buildings here. There's a number of buildings here that I've built that aren't housing. Sometimes I will actually, this is how I sort of plan the shape of certain houses or certain apartments for the most part. This is kind of like the basic internal shape of the apartments that I was building in this sort of configuration. These design elements became this apartment complex over here. It's got a nice courtyard, benches. I actually remember when I was building this was in the, I think this was when the tariffs were first being announced that I was building this. So it would have been like February 2025, I was building this. This is a replica. If you guys remember the Minecraft survival world, this is a replica of the base from that, with the exception of having a couple more windows, or windows in different places, rather. Cheap, more apartments. I really like the aesthetic that I went with here. It came together surprisingly well. I'm still super proud of these two things here. Never felt as much YTKOG as I did right there. Where when I was which building? Where was I kind of missed that message because I was looking at the all the stuff I built in this world. Oh, the one of the survival world. Yes, that's right. That's right. This one. Yep. This is actually like I use sort of different design principles for the survival base for survival bases than I do for other houses. I'm really proud of the sort of design principles and how they evolved with this base. In the survival world, of course, 1v3 will remember this because he was here for this. This building was entirely underwater. I set out with the intention of creating a survival base that was entirely underwater, and I did that. It was great. Here I am getting lost in the sauce again. Eventually, I'll close down Minecraft and talk about something else to end off the stream. But right now, oh, let's go see the Enderman. Some more farms and stuff. These apartments are really nice, actually. I'm a big fan of these. You go in, and the basic shape is you have the one room here where you got the kitchen, and then over here's the bedroom. This is like a viable size of a house for like a survival world if you want to build one of these. In fact, it's actually based off of a house that I built in survival loosely. That's from you can tell which ones are from a tutorial video like, oh, we're going to build this house today because it's like so not how I would build stuff. But I find them interesting nonetheless, so I kind of want to incorporate it into the world. This I'm really proud of. This desert apartment building right here, dorm style apartments. I am so proud of this one because of how I think I made it look really convincingly like it's a desert themed building. You know, in fact, in a way, it kind of resembles the kind of building style that you would see in one of those, like, oh, here's how you build a cool starter survival house. And then they show you something like this. It's like, yeah, cool starter survival house involving moss, bricks, and like a way bigger house than. Hmm. How then can you tell when it's something you build? A lot of the stuff that I build is a lot less ornate. You know, even when I decorate stuff, it's different than how a lot of YouTubers would decorate their shit. For example, I would never build something like this. This has way too many, like, this design is way too noisy for me to come up with on my own. You know? Same thing with this. The shape is, it's too noisy and the shape is far too irregular. It's composed of far too many irregular shapes for me to come up with this on my own. It's just not my style. So the houses I build are much more regular and much more simple. Like this, you know, apartment building. There's some like design flair. That's not to say I don't have any frills on any of my designs, like any of the things that I build, but it tends to be more reserved. And I kind of in a lot of the things that I build, I kind of harken back to the aesthetic of older Minecraft buildings. And I think that it still looks really good, you know, but it's simple. And I like that. So my uh, uh, design aesthetic is a lot simpler and a lot more Minecraft. You know, a lot of these buildings, they look very, like, not necessarily very Minecraft, you know, whereas a lot of the stuff I build looks very Minecraft. And that's intentional, you know? Like this house right here. All the interior decor. This house, by the way, interior decor, I did entirely myself, because sometimes when there's like a how to build such and such house tutorial, they just straight up don't decorate the interior. It's just like a shell, and it's like, okay, well, then I'm gonna do it. You know, like this doesn't feel very quintessentially Minecraft to me, but then like something like this does a little bit more. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to explain fully without just relying on vibes beyond a certain point. But yeah, so like you can tell, this is not something that I came straight from my head. This, you know, these three buildings here, that one there, you know, the mushroom one, those were not like original designs by me, nor was this one. But this is actually a little bit more similar to the kind of shape that I would use when building stuff. This one wasn't either, but I actually really like this one. It's one of the rare designs that I actually really, really liked. In fact, I remember the video that I was watching when building this was like, it was Brian F and SK talking about, I don't even remember what. Oh no, I do remember. SK was teaching Brian F how to play Marvel Rivals. And it was just super cute ever since the like Sajam Slam, to see SK and Brian F develop such a wholesome friendship. And in fact, it seems like SK developed like a almost like a content creator crush of sorts, where like perpetually she perceives Brian F as a cool older brother and mentor. And I think that's cool because Brian F does kind of give off that energy. He's Unk in parentheses cool slash older brother slash dad slash whatever. Well, hello. I don't know where this bee came from. I don't think there's a beehive. You might be lost. Poor bastard. I also made a soccer field, which is fun. Like I really like this non-residential building because instead of being like a industrial thing or whatever, it's just like a community center. Poor fella, yeah. I'm sure he'll be fine. There's some trees around, some hedges, places for him to sit down for a minute if he needs to. See, like you come over to this house, you know. These also, these houses here, these four very long looking houses, I built specifically when the 1.21 update came out. 1.21 point like something, when they introduced this kind of wood planks. Previously, you'll see a lot of these kinds of houses built with birchwood. That used to be the most light colored wood that was available. Otherwise, you'd have to use like wool. Is there a population, even one citizen or lost pet, perhaps? Oh yeah, we were going to see the Enderman. I forgot about that. Um, I'm the only, you know, person in this world here, but there are like there are mobs roaming about and stuff. There is actually a village, like a Minecraft village, not too far from the swamp settlement over yonder. You guys remember the story I told with those apartments about being suckered into fucking high pressure sales job for a day? Here it is. Emmanuel's house. Look at that. Hello. Say hi to Emmanuel. Hello. He always has the grass block. That's another thing. If you give a name tag to an Enderman and they have a block, They never put it down. They just keep holding it. So yeah, this is Emmanuel's house. He lives here. He's just hanging out. Wait, what's up? This settlement extends like interesting thing about this settlement, when I was expanding it, having to hold that block until he dies. Well, he doesn't die because he's a Minecraft mob. He's immortal. He'll live forever. Which may be a fate worse than death, but you don't need to worry about that because Minecraft mobs are just part of the video game. They are not really sentient. So he's got a nice roof on over his head. He doesn't have to worry about getting owned by the rain. It was interesting that when I was building like this settlement out this way, uh it kind of naturally came over across the beachhead into this little plains area because it's kind of hard to build stuff in the forested area without just kind of destroying the forest, which I suppose in Minecraft I should be a little bit more okay with just doing that. But still, it was just kind of like the path of least resistance. So the city kind of extended that way as opposed to going back in here, even though I did a little bit of that over here, you know, making him work forever till the end of your world. He's not working. He doesn't got to do anything. You're getting that's true. I'm getting canceled for my unethical treatment of Emmanuel de Enderman. See, here I did a little bit of the like building stuff in the forest. I actually tried to build stuff relatively small. This I tried to make like part of the trees to keep the as many of the trees around as I could. It's an interesting challenge, I think. I also, every other like non-residential building, I alternate between something that's like a farm or food production and something that's not food production. Because realistically, city this big, even in Minecraft, you have to have plenty of food. Can I donate channel points for his freedom? What would I even do? I can't make him teleport. I can't do that. Only he can like he can teleport. I can't make him, right? Can't let them work for the he's not working. He doesn't have to pay for anything. He just has that. It's free. It's his. Sure, it's yours. I'm the only one working. What does he got to do? He didn't got to do nothing. You know? Now, if I were a capitalist, what I'd be doing is trading back and forth with villagers forever to try to infinitely make profit of like emeralds or whatever. He's forced to hold this block because of your name tag. Oh, well, I can't unname the. Hmm. Also, I wouldn't want him to like pick up a block of glass and let the water in. I don't think you can undo that. I just kind of named him Emmanuel because I didn't want to fucking. I didn't want him to despawn. What gives you the right to decide his fate, his name, his life? I don't know. Because he's not alive? It's an Enderman in game. Here's the actual like village over here. You can see very like spurious chunks that generate as part of like the desert or not. I think there is or at least was a cat that well, I don't know what they're doing in there. Uh there is or at least there was a cat that like hung around this village. Screaming his own English accent. What makes him not alive? Okay, the bit has gone on long enough. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about before ending stream. I may do this while just kind of flying around here because this is like nice scenery, I suppose. Um, every now and again, the topic of homework enters like political discourse or like it'll be like a flash in the pan of discourse about homework, right? And I wanted to ask for like hey, have you considered that Emmanuel might not have wanted or cared for any screen time? You know, have you considered that he is not necessarily an attention hog and didn't want you to talk about him for 20 minutes? Yes, homework. Where in America, the phenomenon of K-12 homework is quite a subject of political debate. And I have actually read up on the subject a fair amount. I'm not the most well read on the issue, but I've read a few studies, all of which basically confirm one of which being an actual study, and the other ones being like a couple of what is it, meta-analyses or research analyses. They like look at other studies and the results of said studies, that homework in K-12 education in America is like basically worthless. Um, insofar as educational outcomes, right? Uh, uh, there is little to no evidence. In fact, there's no relationship, positive or negative, between homework and learning outcomes, and like any sort of metric that you can gauge how well somebody can engage with subject material, right? Outside of test scores, which I do not include as a metric of learning because standardized tests in America are just copy pastes of homework assignments, and homework assignments are designed to resemble standardized tests. It's a catch-22. The only thing a standardized test determines is your ability to do that standardized test. You know, like that's the only thing that score indicates. Like, wow, if you did the homework, that means you sure did do the homework, but that doesn't translate into that clearly does not translate, as we've seen from recent literacy trends and concerning paradigms in pedagogy, clearly does not have any relationship to literacy or critical thinking skills in the youth. Um, and I bring that up because it comes around every so often as a topic of discussion. And somebody got really ass mad at me for saying that. It's like a weirdly ignored data set in America, how little homework contributes to anything meaningful in the development of kids. But homework sticks around nonetheless because of some old like Cold War shit, and also because like unironically, because homework is just like it insists upon itself. It's just a self-fulfilling prophecy where The sort of for the cameras kind of local politics move is to just have the schools assign more and more homework continually. Uh, a trend that's actually been worsening since the end of the Cold War. It really, during the Cold War, America started assigning a lot of homework, and then after the Cold War, it actually got worse. Um, but like somebody got ass mad at me. As it turns out, like they were like, the whole world isn't America, actually. And I said homework. And I am American, and the person posting that I was replying to was American. And this person got ass mad at me for not considering that Italy is different. And I don't want to hover on that for petty reasons. Obviously, it was like a super dumb Twitter thread or whatever. But I wanted to ask, actually, is homework in K-12 education, or like primary and secondary? In America, we call it K-12 because it's kindergarten up to 12th grade, roughly ages 5 to 18 or so. So like before you go to university, how different is the homework in Europe from homework in America? Because in America, it's like routine busy work that kids are just assigned to extend how long they have to dedicate to like school time, right? College homework is a different beast entirely. Like, I will defend certain college homework assignments because in college, you're dealing first of all, you're dealing with things you want to learn about. You have more freedom of choice in college to learn about what you want. Secondly, in college, in higher education, you are learning about very complex versions of these topics, which cannot be squeezed into 3 hours of lecture time per week. So there has to be some extra stuff outside of class. I could tell you, but what is American homework like? While I'm capturing chickens for a mountain, it's kind of hard to describe. Here, hold on. What is this? It's just random. Nope. Word is taking forever to open. This is very much not the kind of homework that I was assigned in school. Okay. For the humanities, like your history, English, whatever, it is mostly rote memorization, ROTE, rote, where like the homework will be some sort of paragraph short response of like, oh, who said such and such. It's all like in history, the homework is like great man theory kind of worksheets to just test your memory, you know? It's very nothing, I would want to say, routine homework assignments in at least in America, but it's probably the case elsewhere too, is just very nothing. Multiple choice, such and such. Uh, who said what at such and such place? Who is this quote from? You know, no critical thinking really involved in such assignments. You know, and you would get a lot of this stuff too. In math class, I mentioned the humanities. In math class, it'd be like, oh, we learned how derivatives work today. I took calculus in high school. We learned how derivatives work. So here's three problems, apply this like derivative or whatever, you know? So I think I would get like a couple hours of homework each night in high school, especially. In middle school would be like actually a pretty similar amount. Kids are given a lot of homework in America. That's the kind of thing where I started reading about it. I was like, to the extent that any of this needs to be reiterated or iterated upon, that should happen during lesson time. That should happen in class. You know, it like a lot of the homework, a lot of the homework is shit that like that should be taught in the lesson and reiterated in the lesson. You know, because you think about it, you're in school for 7 hours out of the day in America. I know in Europe they actually do the merciful deed of allowing children to go home for lunch sometimes to eat lunch with their family. In America, not so. They literally had police officers on the school campus to prevent you from leaving. Um, and you were there for 7 hours out of the day, 5 days a week. And then they gave you an hour to 2 hours of homework every night, sometimes more if you were dealing with long-term projects. That's the thing too. Long-term projects and group assignments and the stuff that does involve critical thinking is not considered homework in America. That's the state of homework in America. And I assume to the extent that homework exists for primary and secondary education in Europe, I assume that it's pretty similar in that it's like wrote stuff that doesn't that's like very antisocial, is very boring and contributes to kids' emotional resentment towards school and you know doesn't contribute to critical thinking skills and that sort of thing. Like to give you an idea of what this person's reaction was, the person who got really mad at me for not considering that Italy is different, or when I'm talking about homework in America in the context of American political discourse. Um, I defined what homework is in how most academics study the issue, which is homework is any assignment that is given to students to be done outside of school time, outside of classroom hours, and it composes a significant part of your grade. Frequently, we do letter grades. We don't usually do pass fail or check plus check minus. Oftentimes, it's still letter grades with a percentage. Homework will compose. It's not unusual to see homework compose anywhere from 5 to 15% of your overall grade. 10% is pretty typical. So, around 10%. So, homework in America is an assignment that you are given that must be done, that you are to do outside of classroom hours, and is worth 10% of your overall grade for the course. And you receive multiple of these per class per week, every week, on top of long-term projects that you also have to do mostly outside of class or in decent part outside of class for the entire school year. And if you don't do them, that's automatically 5 or 15 or 10% that you cannot get on your final grade. So, for instance, if homework is 10% of your grade and you decide homework is dumb and you're not going to do it, the highest grade you can possibly get in that class is 90% because you didn't do the homework. You know, that is homework. Work that you are given by the school, assignments given by the school or, the teacher or whatever, that you must do outside of classroom time. And the strictness of this varies, but oftentimes I would actually get in trouble for trying to do homework in class because I did not want to have to devote more time to schoolwork while I was at home. I wanted to do other things. I wanted to spend time with friends and family and play outside, when I was young. I have no doubt that that kind of contributed to, well, a lot of things. Meant for home, but not necessarily your grades. In most classes, for most grades, it won't be graded. Sometimes you do get assignments, but those are also a lot at school during and in between lessons. Primary school pretty much got no homework. That's the thing. I started getting homework in the first or second grade, 6 or 7 years old. In fact, I think I even got homework when I was 5 years old. For the entire 13 years that you're in the primary and secondary school system, you are regularly assigned homework that is worth a part of your grade in America. As in, like, whether or not you are allowed to proceed through the education system is contingent on you having done it. And again, sometimes the teachers will be merciful and simply grade you for whether you've done the homework, but a lot of times it's also contingent on whether you got the answers right. So it's possible for you to be a good student, do all the homework, and because you get stuff wrong, you're still punished. And again, it's the reason I emphasize that is because it's in largest part it's rote memory. It doesn't revolve around critical thinking. There's one right answer and there are like wrong answers. And you just have to remember what the right answer is. And it's like, oh, you got the wrong answer, so you get points taken off, right? It's very competition brained, as is much of the American school system. That's another overarching problem. Yeah. It's a lot of it is worksheets too. Sometimes for classes that would like not assign homework very frequently, sometimes the stuff they assigned was actually like kind of interesting. Or it'd be like, and a lot of it, because it was interesting, it was not necessarily universal. Like you couldn't expect everybody to do this kind of homework. Like, oh, go outside and look for a bird. Like this, and write down what kind of bird it was. And then tell the class what kind of bird you saw, right? Like that's something that I always expect from like primary school homework. But no, they were giving us worksheets all 13 years that were graded on both completion and correctness. Read about history in such classes, the homework for that is way more critical thinking. Yeah, that's the thing. In America, it isn't. Oh, who said such and such at so and so? When did such and such happen? What year? There's no critical engagement with the material. Not very much of it in the curriculum, though more of it during classroom time because you're actually physically in the room and you talk with each other and with the teacher. But at home, it's just like pick which one, like A, B, C, or D, right? I think that can be quite different between schools. In America, it's like a policy standard where sometimes you're not allowed to not assign homework. Yeah, the absolute state of homework in America is I would say it needs to be studied, but it has been studied quite extensively, and there's very little evidence that it contributes to anything beyond test scores, which is just the homework again, like standardized test scores. It's not like test scores again. There's like no critical thinking involved. When you think test scores, don't think Blue Book. Blue Book essays in college are where you can refer to your notes, but you have to understand the material enough to write about it free form. You have to understand enough about it to come up with a point in your head, to come up with something interesting to say in your head. You write several paragraphs justifying your argument with evidence, organically, spontaneously. You have to be able to do that. And then you are graded subjectively based on how well you engage with it from the perspective of the professor who is an expert in the material. This is the polar opposite of the SOL, Standards of Learning test, and the SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test, that you take in middle and high school. Shit, I was taking the SOLs in elementary school too. They start you on standardized tests when you're 8 years old. Um, where most of those tests are multiple choice A, B, C, and D. Who said what at which place at what time? There's one right answer, there's one wrong answer. Pick which one. And then however many trivia questions. It's trivia. Imagine like Jeopardy or like a trivia game show. That is the format of standardized testing in the K-12 education system in America. I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's the same for Europe. And whether you pass or fail in school is determined by how well you do basically in history trivia. So a lot of Americans will be able to tell you who a lot of American presidents are, but nobody would be able to tell you about like political movements, social movements, why the American Revolution happened beyond some regurgitated propaganda, why, the temperance movement happened, especially why did the Civil War take place? Why were tensions escalating so hard? What parallels does this have to now? Whatever. Anything that requires critical thinking is basically not present on homework or standardized tests until you get to college. Didn't know it was that bad. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Let me see if I can find a sample. SAT sample. Okay. Here is a practice test for the SAT. Basically, this is the material you would get on the Scholastic Aptitude Test, the standardized test that every high schooler is required to take. It just has different questions. Blank, which choice completes the text? A, B, C, or D? Blank, which choice completes the text? A, B, C, or D? Right? This is the writing. This is the English portion. A, B, C, or D? A, B, C, or D? These questions are like more okay because these are reading comprehension questions. But it's still pretty nothing. Because again, it's A, B, C, or D. Which one of these is the right answer? Which completion of the text is best supported by the graph? A, B, C, or D? Yes, this is part of the reason why people seem to be a lot dumber from America, even though everybody in this country, for the most part, is high school educated at the very least, and a lot of people are college educated. A, B, C, or D, all multiple choice. Reading and writing. Oh, wow, look, the reading and writing section does not involve much writing. Does involve some reading. But again, it's very basic shit. Like, here's the math section coming up here. Yeah, there we go. This is where you need to know like mathematical formulas and shit. Again, like multiple choice. It's like a game of trivia. And I know that there's an essay version of the SAT, like where you have to write an essay. But that is a completely separate test that you have to specifically select for. The default is you take this test. If you want specifically, you can request to take the SAT that has the essay, where you have to write an essay. And the essay is not graded for how correct it is, like factually correct. One of the rare instances where you would want somebody to pay attention to factual detail, it's only graded for formatting, right? So you can write a counterfactual, you could write some Nazi shit. And if your essay structure is correct, you get a perfect grade. You know? And by the way, this also, with slightly different formatting, homework assignments, the only difference between this and a homework assignment I would be assigned in middle or high school is that it would just be like, instead of this kind of formatting where it's like the pages is divided in half down the middle and there's one question here, one question here, it would just be question here, question here, question here. You know, it'd be like full page format. That's it. This is standardized testing in America. This is also homework in America. Oh. Frankly, the idea that there are people that still defend that is kind of baffling to me, especially considering that a lot of these people are academics that supposedly care a lot about pedagogy. Remember, like, education skews to the left, you know, um, type shit. Look, whatever. I'm done waffling about the American education system. Um, so whatever fucking happened to teaching in class? This doesn't, like, that stuff doesn't help kids learn. It just doesn't. And it comes around every so often as part of discourse, and I don't like it. And I've ever since like starting to read more about the subject, I felt so fucking vindicated about how much I hated homework and standardized tests. You know, I didn't study for the SAT for these standardized tests. I didn't study at all. I never needed to study for anything until the AP exams in high school for calculus. I studied for that and I studied for my exams in college. Up until that point, I never studied for anything. So much could change about education to make it better. Oh, yeah, so much. But people like, how can the start of every person's life be so flawed? America, baby. Uh, I've seen some people have the reaction, you never studied? Never, never. That's not to say I didn't take notes. I did. You know, I'd pay attention in class, I'd write stuff down, I'd listen. I never studied for like a test or anything until I remember specifically until the AP calculus exam in high school and all my exams in college. I actually flunked because I was so familiar. Here's a story. Because I was so familiar with that format of test taking and homework, I actually flunked an AP exam for my AP political science class. Again, in the day in high school, they called it American government or whatever, but it was an AP political science class. It would have been good for a college credit if I passed the AP exam, but I was so unfamiliar with the blue book format that I flunked it. I misunderstood the format of how I was supposed to do things because you were never that was the first time that a test had ever asked me to critically engage with the material I was given. Like in my mind, that just wasn't part of the school system. That was something that I did on my own that made me like probably smarter than most of the other students in my class, unfortunately. Again, not trying to talk myself up because I'm not that smart of a person in general. Um, but that broke my brain at the time. Like that was the first time I'd ever been presented with that. Um, because the norm was just the rote memory trivia shit. So that's kind of how I treated it, and predictably, I flunked. Uh, I passed the class, but I didn't pass the AP exam, so I didn't get the college credit. I did, however, I treated the math uh, uh, AP exam very differently. I treated it like I needed to get as detailed with my like equations. I had to actually, because I actually wasn't that good at math, I felt like I really had to understand the math in order to like get an answer correct, you know? So the AP calculus exam I did study for, and I passed and I got college credit for that. And as a result, I never had to take a math class in college because I passed I got a good score on the calculus exam in high school, you know? And I went in specifically knowing what I did wrong on the previous AP exam that I had taken. That's the state of education in America. And I was in one of the better funded and better like resourced and more robust education districts in the country. This was like the experience that I had in the classroom with like as little critical engagement as was ever required of me in the classroom. The majority of America has it much worse. I went to school in the DC area, one of the best areas to go to school, primary and secondary in the country, well funded, well staffed and resourced, and that sort of thing. Such was the product of the Reagan administration and NCLB with the second Bush or the first Bush Jr. administration, um, where test scores and grades started to determine how much funding schools get. You might not know this. The way we fund schools is completely fucked. First of all, schools are funded by local property taxes, which is an economic segregation machine. Wealthy areas have better schools because they have more property taxes. They pay more in property tax because they have more property with which to fund the schools. Poor areas pay less in property tax because they are poorer, have less property, so their schools are worse. It's not an accident that school funding is decided like that on the local level. Furthermore, at the state and federal level, how much funding schools get is contingent upon their test scores. Each state gets funding for like education or whatever from the federal government, and they have their own funding as well. How much money schools get is determined by whether they have good test scores or not. And it's not the way that you think it would work, where, oh, this school is struggling, better help it. No, your school will receive less funding if it's struggling. If your school produces lower test scores on average in America, you get less funding the subsequent year. Whereas the schools that produce good test scores, higher test scores, get more funding. Are you starting to see the nature of the problem here? That's why teaching to the test exists. That's why homework exists. That's why these extremely basic trivia as standardized tests exist that are basically identical to these homework assignments. That's why students don't fail anymore. That's why like you're basically not allowed to fail students out of a grade anymore. If you fail a student, that reflects negatively on the entire institution insofar as your ability to secure funding, you know? It's just part of a massive slew of attacks on education as a concept from from the right, from the economic elite, and so on and so on. I think I'm going to raid Hassan. I think I'm going to raid Hassan. Oh, what the is happening? I think I'm going to. I just heard my own voice repeated back to me against my consent. What is going on? I hate this. Pretty sure our high school teachers also depend on what grades they get when it comes to a lot of things besides their payment. I think that's fucked up. I honestly think that any number that you attempt to use to like judge education levels is going to be like a load of bullshit, because that's a subjective measure. It's really hard to assess that. And I think the fate of your school, like whether your school receives funding, shouldn't be entirely contingent on whether or not you produce a big number. You know, that's capitalism brain. You know, is your school assisting the process of line going up? Yes, then here's more money. Make line go up. Is your school assisting the process of making line go up? No, then you don't get any money anymore. These are public schools, mind you. Like all of this is all public schools that I'm talking about. I haven't devoted any time to talking about charter or private schools because those just shouldn't exist. Like education is such a very dynamic and social concept that even if there's some evidence that like kids are struggling with a specific teacher or in a specific class, that shouldn't mean like, oh, no more funding for this class. I feel like that should mean some kind of review process where you talk with the teacher and try to assess the state of the class, whether the students' needs are being considered, whether it's an issue of the curriculum or the teacher or the students or whatever, and like actually try to amend things such that kids are learning and taking an interest in the material, you know? But instead, it's all about big number. This isn't Balatro. Think about it this way. Everything in the economy, especially in America, but elsewhere too, is run like it's a game of Balatro, where you're just trying to make big number and you'll burn down the entire deck of cards to do it. Except instead of a deck of cards, it's a country of like millions upon millions of sentient human beings that have real needs, aspirations, and wants. You know? I've waffled for long enough. Enjoy the Hasanabi broadcast. I'll be back tomorrow.